in similar ways, wounded in similar ways. It sounds like something that a hippie would say, but the truth is we're wounded in similar ways.
All right. Welcome to the Taproot Therapy Collective podcast, the only podcast about therapy on the internet that is cool and gets it. Alice Hawley, what do you do to stick it to the man?
Well, primarily, I do therapy for one thing. I mean, that's a big thing.
James Waits, do you see through the lies of society?
Yes.
We need like some gnarly like Gen X rap rock to lead us in here. If y'all have any suggestions, I'll throw that at the beginning. So anyway, welcome to the Taproot Therapy Collective podcast. We're gonna start doing some kind of roundtable discussions, and for the first one, we thought it would be fun to just kind of talk about topics that we may do during those. We do consultations as a practice, and a lot of the conversations that come up in consultations were like, hey, what's going on in society? What's going on in therapy? How are those things interacting? Are kind of interesting and would make really good podcasts, but you can't record the consultation for a couple reasons. One of them is because like every other question is about how to use something in our EMR, and that wouldn't make for great podcasting. But hopefully we can bring just kind of, because, you know, our audience is generally like trauma patients, trauma therapists, and kind of trauma nerds interested in the psychology of different things. And we hopefully can get into some like interesting topics. So this one, if you hear something you like, leave a comment, and maybe that will be an episode soon. So we can go through like different things that might make for like a good roundtable discussion. I don't know. I was thinking about was it podcast? I was thinking about like having like y'all's perspective or therapist talking about like therapy and movies, therapy and TV. Because it does seem like that's changing a lot, like that old kind of paradigm where HBO would have a show like The Sopranos or In Treatment, where somebody would just be in sort of like a relational, you know, more Rogerian kind of like talk therapy with a little bit of psychoanalytic stuff and maybe some CBT suggestions forever. That just seems to be going away. Like there's a little bit more nuance in how screenwriters are talking about it, but they're still screenwriters. I was watching that show, The Pit, on HBO. Have y'all seen that?
Oh, I've seen an episode.
Yeah, I mean it's okay, but it was like just something that was like on in the background when I have to do Excel sheets, and it's clear that they had like medical advisors that were like making sure they didn't put like the IV bag upside down or something, but they couldn't really change the script, and there were some things about hospitals and psych where I was just like, okay, I see what you Googled and then didn't understand how that actually works. I don't know, for example, there's a scene in the beginning where one of the people's like, or no, it's like it's the beginning of one of the episodes, but it's like further into the season. But they're trying to talk on like sort of like every liberal talking point. Like they're talking about gun violence and hospitals being overwhelmed and like the healthcare system failing and like all these things that like I think are probably good to talk about. But some of the stuff, especially around mental health, is like, no, you kind of got to understand how this works a little bit better. Like there's a guy that comes in and they're like, why are you homeless or something? And he's like, oh, well, I'm homeless because I can't afford my schizophrenia medication. And they're like, okay, well, and he's like, yeah, I went 40 years of marriage and hard work, but then I lost my job. So I smoked crystal meth and I got the schizophrenia from the crystal meth. And you're like, no, you can't get schizophrenia 40 from, like, you could get an anxiety disorder, but schizophrenia, like that isn't, you don't catch, it's not catching, you know? And then they, and then the doctors, they're like a social worker comes in and you can tell they've heard that assertive community treatment teams exist, but they don't quite know like what those are. And she's like, well, all you have to do is ask the emergency room and they'll just bring you your Seroquel into your homeless encampment. And like one of the ER doctors is like, yeah, that's a great idea. Why don't you just, I'd like to be the one who does it. Can I just leave the ER on shift and like go bring this guy medication weekly? And they're like, yeah, problem solved. It's like, no, like this isn't like, yeah, it should work that way probably, but this is not the way. So anyway, I think that would be an interesting one. Any other like trends y'all see on like TV movies with the therapy and mental health care, especially?
I don't know. Have y'all seen The Penguin, like the show on HBO?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, Batman Sopranos. It was better than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah. Did you see the EMDR sessions. I think that.
Oh yeah,
psychiatrist-
that's right.
Oh my
Yeah,
gosh,
like
really?
And-
I don't know the comic stuff. So who is that? Like, who is the lady? Like, what is her villain? Is she in the comics or something? I don't know.
Yeah,
that character.
she's a niche villain. I think she's like, I mean, she might be very big. I've been removed from the DC comic world a good bit, but
Yeah.
I just like that machine he had. I like the light EMDR machine where you didn't have to use his hands. Is
It's
that
just the light device, isn't it? Like it's the bar
Yeah.
that goes back and forth.
Yeah.
Yeah. All that when I trained at EMDR, like I haven't done EMDR for probably 3 years because brain spotting just kind of replaced that almost entirely for me.
Yeah.
But yeah, most of the practitioners that did EMDR all day, they were pretty purist. EMDR providers tend to be kind of culty some of the time. And like they would just do it exclusively for every session. And that's what they told us is like your hands will get too tired. You need to get this machine. It looks like the Knight Rider car.
Yeah, it does.
Like,
Yeah. I thought that was awesome. His span, I thought his spanned a pretty good bit. Like this was huge. It felt like. I don't know.
Oh, the bar, it probably some Hollywood stuff there. Like I don't think most therapists, because you just need the eyes to move. It doesn't really. The further it is away, the longer
Your heads. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know, Alice. What do you notice any therapy and
my TV content is pretty off the beaten path. So I mostly watch like
That's
true
the best
crime
kind.
stuff and really bad reality TV, which is a
It
really
pops
good
up in there
exercise
too.
in- yeah, but I mean the stuff about I don't know, the true crime stuff is always like appealing to my like the part of me that like works with victims and kind of loves the psychology of the abuser and this
That's a good point. Could you put your mic a little bit closer? You're just a little pinched. It's kind of hard to hear you. I think the noise canceling is kind of grabbing you. I can edit that line out.
Is that bad?
Yeah,
Better?
yeah, that's
that
a
better?
good point. Like I don't. No, yeah, go ahead. That sounds great. I've seen like a couple write-ups on like true crime is getting big because of mental health issues. Like true crime is consumed primarily by women, which like I watch a lot of true crime too, so that's not entirely true, but I think it is kind of women
Okay, yeah.
that drive the consumption of it. But it does seem
yeah.
like a way that mental health gets brought up a lot. Do you?
I've talked about it with clients recently. Like I personally noticed a trend of a lot of my like trauma victims really like this all the true crime and like serial killer stuff, and that's for sure I relate to it, so it's kind of interesting, and they're always like I hope I'm not like a bad person or something. It's like, no, you're just trying to like get control of what happened to you and on some level.
It may be like a safer way of doing that, kind of, because a lot of the positive and negative behaviors associated with trauma patients are like people going back into an environment to try and get mastery over it. And I mean, do you see good ways or bad ways that it affects people?
I mean, certainly if you're in trauma, like watching that stuff can be triggering. Like when I was at the height of trauma, I was like, I couldn't go there. But then that was one of the first things that kind of came back as content that I can actually like ironically watch. But I think that, I think it can help a lot. And a lot of the content I think coming out recently is following maybe the trend of kind of recognizing the psychology of like the abuse dynamic.
The cycle of violence or
like
more
the
than that.
documentaries about like the Gabby Petito case, and it's just like so like women relate to that so much. I don't know if y'all, I mean, but it's do y'all know what I'm talking about?
Yeah,
I'm not familiar with that one.
Okay.
The van lady or the van couple. Is that right?
Yeah, she was she's like 20, I mean young 20s or something. I'm gonna get it wrong, but yeah, she was like off to do like a social media tour.
Yeah, I did. The one on Netflix, that one was awesome.
Yeah, and there's a new one.
Oh.
Yeah, so it's a young 20s girl who kind of gets like creative type who's kind of trying to embrace the world, and then she gets consumed by this like very controlling abuser, but was putting out like all this social media content that seemed like everything was perfect, but she was really isolated with him in this van traveling in all these really remote places, and he was like violent with her in the background kind of thing. And But yeah, there's a lot of kind of that kind of content that I think, I don't know. I mean, I find it fascinating.
Yeah, that may make a or either of those together, TV, movies, and then even true crime in itself may make it like a fun kind of episode.
Yeah, and kind of the component of like what you were saying, like it's safe way of processing, like it being like just the anxiety that you can process, like, or you know, kind of like the high, that like dopamine high that comes with like the trauma and like victimization and stuff. It's like you can access that in a safe way though, where you like know it's all going to be okay. Like you're going to be okay, even in spite of what you're watching.
Yeah, and I think too, like there's such a celebrity culture in America that just when people are like, "Oh, this celebrity is famous and beautiful," and they had the same thing happen to them as me, that there's something about that is comforting to like Americans specifically. Sometimes too.
Yeah,
I don't know. That sounds like a fruitful topic. James, you got one that, you got anything that you've floated a couple, like the yogic breathing episode. James wants Alice to lead us in some like Akashic medicine.
See if we can actually chill out. No, I was laughing at the beginning of this because I wanted animism is pretty big, you know, and y'all have done some stuff on animism a good bit. But I like that topic. But I was laughing because I guess a little bit regarding as dragon female energy.
So you want to get James wants to get into the new age stuff? Is that
Yeah.
I was told to ask Alice about dragon.
I mean,
So
I can
a
go
client
there
of yours
if
asked
y'all
you
want
to
me to
ask
go
Alice
there.
about female dragon energy. Is that right? Just to clarify.
I was looking it up, and I'm still confused on Google.
Is that the dragon energy
you're
of
not
the
gonna
female
you're
or
not gonna
female
get it.
dragons?
You're not gonna understand it. You're just not gonna understand it. So this is like the energy. It's like this archetypal energy of this is how, and there are a lot of people who have different relationships with this energy, but it's basically this idea of kind of, I mean, it's sort of a little like a phoenix kind of analogy, where it's to me, a dragon is like like your dragon energy is like the trauma that you've transmuted into kind of your power. So it's like this really like what would otherwise be this kind of like reptilian, like oriented, like in terms of like how your brain reacts. Part of you like becomes like your power. And so there's this feminine, like divine feminine idea of like that's sort of this energy that's been in, you know, in oppression for a long time, and it's coming out as like dragon energy. And so that's like sort of where the connection is. And then different people connect with maybe like particular dragons. So there's, you know, you can take it, but that's like what I think is what that's about, maybe, and in the most like, you know, I think it's empowering stuff is what you're talking about.
Yeah,
but definitely off the beaten path.
It is.
I can go there if it's off the beaten path in that
I would love a whole hour on dragon energy. I'm not laughing because it sounds crazy. I'm laughing because I could see where it is powerful and thinking about that and the beauty behind that, you know. And we think this ugly dragon, like I was thinking of Smaug, you know, in the mountains of gold, but he's a really pretty dragon, but there's a lot of things there, a lot of meaning, a lot of
sort of more like
wake up the female.
I'm not a big
only the male dragon.
Wait,
I'm not a big Game of Thrones person, but I picture it's more of like a Daenerys with her dragons kind of vibe.
Riding a dragon,
you know, and then ignore, like, I can't remember what happens at the end of that, but something.
Have you ever read
the dragons die and things?
Have you ever read Edward Edinger or Eric Neumann, the like kind of post-Jungian guys?
I'm not a lot.
No,
a lot of the anthropology. I mean, reading Eric Neumann is a slog. Like Emily heard me listening to it on an audiobook one time. It was like, what in the world? Because like you have to like look up all of this dated language. Like he talks about like Ouroboros incest and all this stuff for a long time, which doesn't have anything to do with actual incest. It's like the self rejoining the self,
right?
Whatever. You have to be familiar with like very outdated biology to understand his metaphors. But one of the things that he's doing with like where a lot of that stuff comes from, like when you hear Jordan Peterson talking about like you have to slay your dragon and ride it. And he doesn't even really know his sources. He just sort of absorbed this stuff in the Jungian circles in Canada in the 90s. Like there was some of those post-Jungian guys, there's this idea that in culture that there was like a female, like a matriarchal culture before civilization. And then as cities developed, it became like a more of a patriarchy, and that there was a goddess cult beforehand where you get like which like for a long while they thought all of that was like disproven, and now that's kind of coming back into modern archaeology, like with the Malta-Burret culture and all these kind of like proto-mythological civilizations. They're saying like there was this maternal, you know, thing where women and birthing, and like especially very heavy women are depicted a lot. So we think that they were like, yeah, you know, big women are able to do more babies. This is the point of civilization. And this is, and then that is replaced by kind of like a king and priest class when you get cities. And so a lot of what he talks about is that that's reflected in mythology. So like Babylonian mythology, that you have Tiamat, that it's this big dragon goddess, and then the male hero goes out and kills that goddess and builds civilization. And that happens in Egyptian Norse, like all of it is what they were saying. What Neumann is saying is that that maternal like goddess cult is being described as being overthrown by the city structure and these hero myths of the early society. And so like a lot of and they thought it was bad, it was out of balance, that we needed sort of a masculine and a feminine and an active and a passive principle, and just a society governed by the hero myth and the great man theory of history was doomed to fail because it was too hubristic and had no humility and had no interest in sustainability, which I think that's why people are gravitating to that kind of thing now, is that a lot of those things are probably true. And, you know, the problems that the world is facing is making them kind of go back to that. So when you hear about the divine feminine and like the riding the dragon, a lot of those things, I think that's where the scholarship's coming from. But most of the people talking about that stuff online, I don't think really know the history or the sources. It's an appealing idea, which you don't have to. I mean, perennial philosophy belongs to no one.
You can take it or leave it, but a lot of people with extrasensory, you know, gifts like channel this stuff themselves, like independently. So there's also like there's a component of there are, you know, and like I said, you can like take it or leave it, but I'll just like there's there's kind of like, this is where the dragon energy, when you're talking about kind of the uncovering of like that the old matriarchies and the old ways, like that all coming is like this collective energy force of like that dragon energy coming into the collective of like uncovering like that old matriarchal ways and like collapsing like in a tower moment, like all the divine masculine like constrictive corporations and structures and society and abusive stuff.
I can see why that would be like a very helpful kind of mythological framework. And I mean, you bump into the same thing that you do with like all depth psychology and perennial philosophy, is it's like people who don't know each other continue to discover this stuff independently. So is that an evidence basis for it? You know, archetypes or something, you know, people have had that fight for a long time.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm getting at. And I'm very interested in it because there's a certain level, like if you're actually interested in like this random niche and come from a scientific background, you start realizing like the statistics don't really make sense as to why there are all these disparate people coming up with sort of like parallel and similar stuff. So there's a component there, like where I'm very interested in consciousness, you know, when it comes to psychology, like consciousness is like kind of the cutting edge of like maybe where psychology is going in my mind. But so it kind of intersects with all that.
It's definitely consciousness is the majority of what this podcast is about. But I think that's a lot of people who are more kind of intuitive and like empathic and want to engage with that stuff as like their personal myth, I think are less reticent to learn the history of those ideas, because a lot of them are kind of old men, white men writing about them. But like an argument in my mind to do that is it actually does give you a basis and evidence to say, well, if, you know, the white brotherhood in Hungary is coming up with, which that's his name, it has nothing to do with being white, you know, like, and all of these different like mystical people are coming up with these same ideas, and there's no like interaction, then doesn't that give you like sort of a framework to see them as more psychological ideas that are inevitably going to be discovered by humans, and not just ideas that we need to fight about the veracity of them, if they've come up for 2,000 years fairly consistently. But
maybe it's this information that we're accessing at a different level of consciousness in some
yeah,
places.
and a lot of those regions of the brain that show up as reptiles are like the part of the reptile brain too, which is sort of an interesting
exactly. And that's where, and I think that's where we get to, like, we could talk at some point about like narcissism and like how I think it's like the reptile brain. And
let's do dragons. Let's do a dragon episode. This sounds good. I want to talk about the parietal eye, the little brain structure we get from our reptilian ancestry, where dragons, probably dragons, but lizards and sharks have like a clear scale.
Can I just make dragon jokes?
Yeah, please. You can. We'll do some.
I'm not going to do them here.
Okay.
Some
what about animism?
Dragon jokes.
Yeah, if we
all the dragons are leaving the audience.
But for clarification, I do want to know, like, how do you start that conversation with
about dragons?
Well, yeah, but I mean, just kind of like, or my dragon energy. Like, how do I go if I'm looking for that, or if I'm, if I'm interested and curious, what do I do?
How you kind of learn about it?
Yeah.
I think definitely, meditation, honestly.
Okay.
Like if you meditate a lot on it. And that's where it's like you kind of hit those higher levels of consciousness. And this stuff kind of gets downloaded into you. But there are a bunch of people who talk about it. Kaya Ra is a spiritual kind of teacher that I really like, who talks about dragon energy, but I don't know. It's very, very divine feminine oriented. So I'm not sure that I would, I'll think about it. Where's a good place to research?
When I think a lot of
you'd have to talk to a psychic, probably.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, there's ways into this stuff. I think, like both directions. I mean, there's very metaphysical, personal. You just emptying your brain and things are kind of downloaded into you. But there's also like a lot of kind of anthropology and archaeology and like other stuff too. Like there's, I don't see those things in tension, but it seems like a lot of the media about that makes you sort of pick a side. I don't know.
Right. It shouldn't. Yeah.
Well, this can be considered like dragon work, like shadow work, but just wanted to.
I mean, it's a type of, you could definitely use it as a type of shadow work. If it's something that I wouldn't necessarily like, I mean, dragon work is like shadow work, kind of getting in touch with that which kind of empowers you out of your trauma. And it sort of just becomes like almost this kind of a like friend that you make that's like your power source that's behind you. And kind of this energy, this flavor of energy that you can feel, like, when you're really in that, after you've like transmuted a trauma, like really healed from it and integrated it, there's like, it doesn't just go away. You kind of have this like strength that's like there, that's a different flavor of energy than you had before. So it's kind of like that almost is like that dragon energy where it's like you kind of transmute it and make it into your power. And
what is it? There's a lot of like mythopoetic, like Jungian men's movements in the 80s that sometimes like were criticized as being like patriarchal or whatever, but most of them, like if you look at them, the people were really kind of like, men are getting toxic and bad in the 80s, and Robert Moore and Bly and a lot of people leading those, I think, were trying to sort of like basically treat PTSD in ways when the biomedical model was sort of at its height in psychiatry. And but there's a lot of stuff there too that I think also can apply to men, about like realizing that you sort of have to give up control to have control. And Robert Moore's got a lot of books on riding your dragon as kind of like this task of individuation. And but I mean, ultimately at the base of that, like a lot of things we talk about, you're learning to tell your intuition from your trauma, because they come from the same place of the brain and they're easy to mistake one for the other. They feel like this kind of subcortical energy that can possess you, if you don't have a better relationship to it.
Yeah. I should too say that, like, when I'm talking about divine feminine energy, I am referencing like that, like the divine feminine energy that's like present in everybody, like no matter your gender or your sex. And so it's like that in everybody, in the two of you as well, like that divine feminine energy is like your feminine dragons are awakening too. So
oh no.
So
Or yes.
Yes, but and in the collective, you know, it's not just among women, but it's certainly, like women are the archetype of, you know, what we're talking about. So
it's interesting too, like fantasy has this like obsession with dragons, but they also create this problem just from like a plot perspective of like you can't really do anything with them. Like Lord of the Rings is missing the dragon after the Hobbit, because if you have a dragon, it just makes like the whole battle pointless, you know. Like Game of Thrones sort of hits that problem. Like he has to like retcon something about Smaug, where he's like, well, Gandalf actually wanted them to get rid of Smaug because it was like the last dragon and he didn't want the shadow to get it or something. Like he has to come up with a reason why dragons can't participate in like the big thing. And
right.
I mean, like Game of Thrones kind of has that problem where they're like trying to wrangle armies and like get, you know, pre-Renaissance era like swords and stuff, and then the dragon is just like an F-16, like it ends. Nothing matters really once you have a dragon. Like, so James, you were talking about animism. You talking about the podcast we did on the difference in ritual and animism and kind of ritual magic type?
Yeah, I think that was a couple months ago, right?
I think so. I don't know.
Yeah.
I just tap into the ancestral plane, and then I don't remember, you know, most of the episodes because it's 2 a.m. and I'm exhausted.
No, it's just something I'm interested in, and just kind of getting back to that. I think there's a lot of good things that we think about when we think about animism, but it's something that I'm not a pro at. But
you mean like just the idea of re-enchanting the world, like treating the world and the pieces of it like it has a soul? To me, like more of a. I'm not saying that's what you're saying. I'm asking.
Well, kind of, yeah. And then like the whole. I think I lost there. I'm lost, but you're going down the path that I was thinking about for sure.
How did you encounter it, or what were you thinking of?
Actually, I have a couple clients that are just very interested in it. And I'm like,
is that like a personal religious practice or just like as a concept?
As a concept, and kind of both. And
it
so
kind of crosses over into like into tantric yoga or tantra, which like invites you to see everything in your world as like divine, like can be a way to connect with the divine, like tangible stuff. Whereas a lot of like spiritual perspectives or philosophical perspectives kind of are more ascetic and get you to disconnect from everything. Tantra kind of is one of these that kind of like connects you with the physical stuff. And but yeah, animism is very kind of along those same lines, I think right.
What are the ideas that are coming up for you in therapy or that you're looking at, James, when you're thinking of, like, I'm just trying to think of how to kind of structure an animism episode or what that would
I mean, going to my note, it's kind of like the kind of like reconciliation of faith, and like whether the Christian God but being able to see that God everywhere, and then people wrestling like I kind of that reconciliation piece where they lost faith, coming back into faith, but the new faith is more of like open. It's here, it's around me. But that they still see that and feel that God, that same God that they saw before, but in different things. And it's about wrestling with that. And I think it's pretty neat. And it goes deeper than kind of exploring that with them, but it's kind of bringing that to their attention that they feel guilty that they're outside of nature and just feel God. And I'm like, and see God in everything and in people. And so they wrestle with that. They wrestle with that like uneasy feeling of like, can we do, is
this allowed?
Yeah. Because like, God is a, man God, is he physical? Is he not? All those things. And so it's kind of like, again, they're feeling the presence of this God that they knew before, lost faith, and then they get back, that faith, but now it's more present in everything, and so it's confusing.
That I remember in comparative religion school, really like kind of resisting that urge to put things into the categories of monotheism and polytheism. When then they were explaining that, and I was just going through and like, yeah, but what religious tradition is alive where these things are as separate as you're trying to make them? I mean, there's Hinduism, which most people would say is polytheistic. Some of the earliest Vedas are the guy going to ask the gods, like, how many gods are there really? And he's like, 900. And then he's like, no, really, how many are there? And Vishnu's like, okay, fine, it's 30. And he's like, no, but really, how many are there? And he's like, oh, it's 5. And they just manifest as more as you need them. And he's like, no, really, how many are there? And he's like, there's one. It's just me. It's all me, you know?
Yeah.
And then there's tons of, you know, Christian mystical traditions where you see other people, you know, finding like Gnosticism, you're finding like the spark of God in other people and like actualizing that by putting it together and building community. Like you can't do that alone. You know, you're seeing the world is sort of alive in like the presence of God. So it's like, I don't know, you know, like I get that if you treat it like a country club and you're like, I'm just going to drive my chromed out SUV to the mega church and then I'm going to go to the Cheesecake Factory and it's religion as a country club. Like, yeah, okay. But when the tradition is actually participatory and sort of breathing, are those things ever separate in anything? I mean, I'm thinking of like the Aztec story where they all get down to like having started with a mystical tradition that was based in this idea that we are all one and you are God and we're all God. Mm-hmm. And then it gets taken over by like a structure of religion that kind of squelches that. And it's like, no, you can't like actually, like we can't tell everybody that they can connect with God. We can't tell them that. And like, then the masculine structures come in and squelch it. Mm-hmm. But it starts with that kind of realization that people have had like over time, like of that same kind of click that your individual clients are having too, of that click of like, whoa, like we're one. And like, how does it feel walking around? Like, what is the walking around effect of like really living that? What does it feel like? Well, and even Buddhism, which is pretty, you know, most traditions of Buddhism are pretty atheistic. Like they're skeptical even of consciousness and say it's this kind of illusion that's been created. Right. But even they have this idea that like, you see the divine in one spot intensely so that you can learn to see it everywhere. You know, that is the point of the encounter. And what is it? It may be apocryphal, but I've read it a couple of times. There's that story where the Spanish conquistadors are like making the Aztec warriors like smash the temple. And there's like the stone figures and they smash it and they're like, yeah, look, your gods are gone. You have to be Christian now. And they're like, these are just rocks. Like the gods have been dead forever. Like, and the conquistadors are like, what? Like, yeah, no, the moon god, like this is just like, these are pieces of her body and like chaos is always in this cycle. And we just have to sort of do these rituals to remind ourselves that it works that way. And like the Spaniards have like no comprehension of like that kind of cosmology, you know?
Right. Yeah. They were in a different realm of consciousness and it was kind of, yeah. Can't explain it.
They did have.
Can't explain it to the conquistadors.
Quick reminder that we do this podcast for free, and there are significant expenses associated with it, including the biggest resource in my life right now, which is time. One of the things that would really help us, and hopefully it would help you, would be to check out one of our sponsors, Hardy Nutritionals. Hardy is a vitamin company that I never encountered the advertising of. We heard over and over again from multiple people with treatment-resistant anxiety and dopamine disorders like bipolar disorder and other things that they had tried everything and Hardy was what worked. And so I checked them out and they have really good research. I'm not a fan of a lot of the BS that's in the supplement and wellness space. Hardy paid for a lot of research on their product. And when I ordered some for myself, I saw a big difference in my life. And my wife made fun of me, thought I was going to be Alex Jones selling vitamins on the radio. And when she tried them, she really liked them too. There's a lot of data about how they can reduce the symptoms of ADHD without medications or lower your need for medication, also manage some of the effects of autism spectrum disorder, and a whole lot of other things. Newer research around nutrition is saying that the synergistic effects of multiple things being planned to work together is a lot more effective than one thing working alone. You can get a lot of information about that on our website, or you can head over to Get Hardy, that's GETHARDY, and use offer code TAPROOT for 15% off. It would help them, it would help me, and it also would probably help you. One of the more frequent things that patients and people in the randomized controlled trials that Hardy conducted report is that they feel more themselves, more focused, and more effective at getting things done, which can result in all of us having a little bit more time.
Yeah.
Well,
they didn't stop to ask.
What other stuff, what other topics, you know, would be things that you kind of see like emergingly relevant, or you just like want to say the profession? I mean, half the things that I write are just like, I'm angry that everybody at school said it worked this way, and everybody else, practices are structured this kind of traditional way, and we're just like, no, it doesn't work that way. Like, we need to go back to a lot of the things that we used to know worked better, that we forgot, and even if they're not popular. I don't know. I mean, some of the stuff that I write it's really about other providers, not individuals, but just movements and psychology, and the way we apply it clinically.
Yeah.
Any big topics or things you feel like would be helpful, James? Like, yeah,
I'm just well, obviously it's a lot of how one of the biggest things is like, provider burnout is huge right now.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's mental health professionals, whether it's physicians, anything. A lot of people who are just providing a service to people. It's trying to get back to the basics of why do we do this? Why do we enter the same path over and over again? As a profession, we do the same things that people burn out before us have burnt out on, and we see ourselves doing it. But how do we, stay, and how do we maintain? So, kind of exploring that and what we can do. There's a lot of stuff on that. I've been doing a lot of mindfulness-based stress reduction work with a lot of people. That's been really effective. And it kind of showing them that you got to take back control of something, and sometimes that's your body, and that kind of alleviates some of that tension at work. But a lot of these things are just around systems and organizations that can't change, and that's the biggest thing as well. And so it's kind of big relationship talks with inside their organization that helps with that trust. But that stuff is important to me, and something I'd like to continue to discuss.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of James's practice is about medical burnout, executive burnout, kind of helpers, healers, and decision makers. The strain on them. That'd be an interesting. Do you see much of that, Alice? I'm not sure. You're kind of client focused.
A little bit, for sure. And I think, but not as much like medical burnout per se. I do see other like practitioners though, so of like kind of counselors and social workers. So,
well, I mean,
so that stuff does come up, but I think it is, it's interesting. I think how.
I think it happens everywhere, but I mean, me and James both worked in a hospital before we did this. But the thing that I would see was like they would do a talk or something where they're like, "This is the problem. Everybody knows it. We need to get back to this thing that is self-evidently good," and everyone would be like, "Yeah, we should do that." And then you'd go into these meetings, and they're like. But the problem that they're all talking about is bureaucracy, or the effect of bureaucracy, which sort of it does two things that I think are like evil, and no exaggeration. Like I think are evil. Like one, it sort of deflects like all accountability so that no one is at fault, and you never can solve the problem because like everybody participated in it a little bit, which I don't think is like a good structure. And then like two, like a lot of bureaucracy, I think what it does is like it makes it to where you're taking things that are self-evident and then you're trying to find like empirical structures to replicate them or to measure them. And you can't. Like the thing that you're trying to do, like competence, a lot of the time is just like not something you can have a checklist for. And what I would see a ton of the time is like we'd have the meeting where they talk about the effect of over bureaucratization of these things. And then be like, yeah, this is bad, so let's fix it. And everyone's like, yeah, and they agree. And then but the only solution is more of the thing that did the problem. Like you can never just be like, hey, if we all know this is true, can we just know it and move on? It was like, no, but we got to prove it and have a checklist and a screener. Like, look, guys, this is just 65 questions to ask somebody to find out if they have anxiety. And it was like, I know that. Like, I know if they have anxiety. And by question 30, they're going to have a lot more, like, do you see that at all? Because that's kind of what I saw. And I don't want to pick on healthcare because it's not just a healthcare thing. I think it's a human thing. I mean, we just talked about it in religion. So it's everywhere.
Yeah. Well, just an example, I had a massage on Friday and it was awesome. And, but I was, I kind of asked, like, how many bodies do you see before you just have to call it quits in a day? And they're like 4. I'm like, 4? You could give 4 massages and you're done, like physically. But they're like, no, that's also mentally. Like, 4. Yeah. So it's, and then, but their capacity was at least, like 8 bodies a day or, 6 bodies a day, but it's dwindled down to 4. And I think that's what we do as professionals in this, right? Is that we somehow pull back because we start listening to our bodies and our minds, and we're like, we went from, and then we don't take a step back and how do we get from 8 to 4, you know? How do we do that? And then but yeah, it's outside of the medical. That's my point, is kind of, it's anything that provides a service to someone in some aspect. We're finding the same thing over, is how it's decreased capacity, and that could be a lot of factors, and some of those factors I definitely want to explore.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Yeah. I don't know. Alice, you got a topic or anything that you feel like would make a good episode?
I like the stuff we're talking about. That's just, yeah, I'm trying to think what else. I mean, we kind of hit on it. Like, I mean, I think a lot of stuff about like personality disorders and complex PTSD. To me, maybe, I don't know how much we can get at, like, you know, I see complex PTSD as being like sort of more of a systemic issue.
Yeah.
For
I mean, the R.D. Lang thing of like, it's a normal reaction to the world. It's like,
yeah,
it's not insane to be insane in an insane world. R.D. Lang stuff.
Right. And then I think a lot of society is just walking around with this baked in trauma from just like how our society is built in, and having to, and this is like where people feel like they have to like fit into these boxes and molds and do things in this very particular ways. And that's burning people out. You know, it's like that, but yeah. So I don't know, stuff like that I think is really where my head's at a lot of the time. I'm trying to think what else. Yeah. I don't know. What about you?
Yeah. I mean, how do you see that in your practice? Like the kind of, because I see people who come in and they all feel like they're universally not able to deal with something that's just like bad and overwhelming, and just being like, no, I can't deal with that either. And I also talk to, 20 people a week that are saying the same thing. So you're not alone with that, but there's something about the culture that makes us feel alone. Like if you're having an issue or you're having a problem, that it's not something that everyone else is having. But I think it is. A lot of that is.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'll just say that to people. I mean, I think a lot of the people who seem to have it all together, like, are actually, the people that, like, if you got inside their heads, like, you wouldn't want to be that person. Like, I think they're all like kind of like people who've had to just really, a lot of people who've had to really like fit themselves into a particular box, and and those are the people that a lot of people are kind of venerating or putting up on a pedestal. And it's like, those are the people who are doing things in this certain way that, like, if you do that, you're going to get completely burned out because it's somebody else's, which is this very static way of being. Does that? Yeah.
Yeah. Show me a hero and I'll show you a tragedy, I think is the Fitzgerald line. What about LLMs, AI? I'd like to do one on that. The effects of that on, I think I don't know if it sounds like you listened to that Animism episode, James, a while ago, but one of the 3 lines in that ritual and Animism episode that I did based on some of the qualitative stuff tracking the way psychosis shows up through the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. There's these the brain has been relatively modern for a long time, like about 2 million years. It didn't change.
Yeah.
So the way that consciousness changed was around things like technology and culture and civilization, and then the unconscious being the sort of compensatory mechanism to help us balance all of the forces we don't notice but need as a counterbalance to whatever civilization has done to consciousness, like in any era. And a lot of the stuff in that episode is about how the metaphors that we can draw through technology change the way that we think about consciousness and ourself. Like there's that meme joke that made the rounds like a couple months ago where somebody was like, like clocks are invented, and then the person's like, God is a clock, or or buildings are invented and people are like, God is an architect, and then like whenever the internet is invented and people are like, oh, God is a network. Like, but there is something to that, and I think LLMs probably are going to, I'm not a huge fan, and I think things like ChatGPT will probably fall apart and take a chunk of the economy with them. I don't know when that will happen. But and maybe not, but I just don't see like a ton of, I'm not like an enthusiast kind of tech bro there, but I do think that something like that, just being a part of something that we will be interacting with every day in 5 years, is inevitable at this point. Like, we like it or not, like we all kind of have to rely on the latest thing. It's hard to unwind the clock, but I think that changes the way that we think about ourselves in ways that are important. And sometimes nefarious, but also sometimes opportunities for interesting stuff. Like, for example, the AIs, they're not AIs. They're basically like search engines that just are predicting the next word in a sequence based on a very complicated algorithm. So that you're getting somebody who said something like what you're trying to say put into a blender with a whole bunch of other data that's being marked as high quality. And one of the things that does, I think, is it really separates like what humans can do from what they're calculators, basically. Yeah. And I think that the one thing that's kind of good there is it's like all of the people who are like really proud that they had all this like information and ability to just like regurgitate like traditional hierarchical stuff. Like that isn't a skill that I think is useful. And now that LLMs can just do them in a second, I think that maybe is a part of like the structure of our culture that is being seen as like not human, as like a calculator, like not the point. And that the intuition and the emotion and the ability to make connections that a computer can't make is maybe going to be a little bit more celebrated. I'm trying to like find a ray of sunshine in the LLM thing, but does that make sense? Like, I don't know. It seems like there's some places to go with that talk.
Yeah. I've been guilty the last, week on that trend of Studio Ghibli type cartoons from photos, and having ChatGPT recreate some. And I was, and last week, it melted kind of some of the ChatGPT's like servers because people are just doing it often. But then I just, it was kind of realized that like Miyazaki, the founder of Studio Ghibli, is just anti-AI. It's like it took a year for me to do this one scene, draw it out and animate it, and then I haven't seen if he said anything recently about this trend, but you're just thinking about that of like, yeah, it's something so small, just like recreating a photo is kind of just counter to somebody's core thought about the thing itself. And now I feel bad about it.
Have you ever seen the clip of Miyazaki like going to the computer school like a couple of years ago for like their thesis or whatever? It's pretty painful to watch because he's like he's kind of a difficult guy and won't comment on his own work, and when he does, it tends to be like kind of misdirection almost. Like but there's like a clip where there's these PhD students at a Japanese technical university, and they're like, this algorithmically does whatever, and they've made like some kind of zombie with no head, but it's like walking with its legs or something, or it's walking with its like arms, and it's like this mutant creature, and it's like for a video game programmer, and they're all like really proud, and Miyazaki's just like, if you want to make horrible things like this, go ahead, but I think this is the death of life itself, and it's bad, and you're making the world worse. And their like faces fall, and they're like, we're not trying to do anything. He's like, no, I've said what I have to say.
Yeah.
But it's in Japanese, and you have to but yeah, he is not, and he ends with him kind of saying, I think humanity's lost faith in itself. Yeah. Like we're kind of trying to create something that saves us instead of saving ourselves. And I think that was almost 10 years old, that clip now.
I need to go.
So I'm sure he's not a fan of his work being able to be for you to be able to plug in,
No, I don't think he would be happy about that.
I'll be the dissenting voice because I actually really like ChatGPT in it.
Yeah.
But I have some beliefs about. I have some views there because I think you have to already know a lot in order for it to be useful in the way that it can be very useful. It's like you have to know exactly what you're trying to find, and like I don't know. It's interesting though once you get it to kind of.
But I think that's true. Is you have to know what it is. I mean, I use Claude AI and ChatGPT all the time. They're great for organizing information. They're great for summarization. I think they can't make intellectual leaps or kind of ideological connections between information in the way that a human can.
What if it can?
What if it can?
Yeah. What if it can? What if it does?
Yeah.
Are we in trouble then?
I think they'll get better at it. But the problem right now is that like they're not really generative. They're iterative because they're discovering things that were connections somebody else already made. Even if it doesn't know why that was there or who to figure it out, it's there in the probability of language.
Yeah.
But they're essentially kind of like probability management engines that can be designed to mess with the probability of language or code based on something else that already exists. But without training data, without a vacuum, they can't really do anything, and the leap of consciousness. And I don't know, maybe this is a bigger episode, but all of the theories of consciousness that I like Damasio and Gazaniga and the older kind of like Jungian people, it's about it being a result of like opposing forces that do not get along and have these contradictions that can't be resolved logically. And so we need like a metaphorical or a symbol-based system in order to like understand it. And I think it's that computers have multiple inputs that disagree a lot of the time. But what they don't have is like a second layer of understanding that can get outside of language to help understand the limitations of language. I think that's something that is uniquely human, that you need a very layered processor to do that. I don't even know how you would code something like a subconscious, But maybe that's a bigger episode.
Yeah, that's a whole big episode.
I feel like there's a lot there for sure.
I think Alice is going to side with the Terminator. That's what that.
No, I think that as long as you're in the light, as long as then you're fine. It's gonna be fine. It's gonna be like it can only augment. I think what we can do. I think there's terrible stuff but I think it could solve cancer like that, like stuff like that. I mean, and there's things like that once you realize like how it can consolidate like research and all this stuff that. Like it could take it like 3 days to do that, to like analyze all the research ever and be like, here's how to cure herpes.
No, I think that's it. I think the databases for like the law and for like published research, that's where those will shine, because they can they can sort of like filter information and discard what's not helpful very quickly in a way that even the search engine can't.
Yeah.
It is funny though that all of when those came out, like immediately all of the like big political like Harvard Yale figures started trying to cancel each other because it came out that like all of their PhDs were just like plagiarized. Basically, when LLMs were invented, you could detect that super quickly, and they all tried to cancel each other for like a second, and then they moved on because they realized like you can't cancel everyone in academia who did plagiarism because it's everybody. It's kind of like when the opposite team wants to impeach the other people's president, and then they're like, or not impeach him, but like do legal stuff, and then it's the system's kind of like, yeah, no, we don't do that at that level because everyone like we can't actually prosecute a president because then I don't know. Well, that sounds good. I know y'all got some other stuff coming up. We can wrap up unless y'all have anything else to kind of throw in.
I don't think so. I mean, I think it'll be fun.
Yeah.
I'm excited.
Sounds good. Anyone want to take the lead on any of those, or have like anything that jumps out you want to do next month? We can. We'll see. We'll play by ear.
Yeah, we'll play by ear. I definitely want the dragons. I want the dragon stuff.
All right. Maybe the dragons will be the next one. We'll look up the dragon episode.
Oh gosh,
get real spiritual. I don't know if y'all are ready for how woo that gets.
What? Yeah. You never know.
Gonna follow the dragon all the way down.
I'm like the comic relief, so I'm just here for the fun times.
I thought that was me.
Oh,
this might be Solomon.
It's Solomon for sure.
Oh, I've got one that I forgot about until now. So when you have a kid, you find yourself reading like the same children's book like 900 times until they get tired of it. And I think it would be really funny to do like a children's book episode where you like, because what happens is like they become this mystical tome that like it becomes like a Buddhist meditation of reading like Pat the Bunny, like until it.
Oh my God, so many of them though.
Yeah. But like to do like a children's book podcast where you just like wildly overanalyze like these things, like Pete the Cat. You all ever seen Pete the Cat?
Yeah.
It turned into like this industry where it has all these other characters and stuff. But the original book is just that the cat's buttons are one by one taken away. And as the cat's buttons are taken away, it just walks along and sings its song and it doesn't care. And even at the end, when all of its buttons are taken away, it still has a belly button, so it is content. And like analyzing that like a retelling of the Book of Job or something.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Just analyze the giving tree. Let's do that.
Yeah.
Or
Scuffy
Curious
the
George
Tugboat is one of my favorites that I rediscovered.
What is it?
Scuffy the Tugboat is pretty
I don't know
great.
that one.
I don't know that one.
It's an old. It's one of the old like golden books, but it's a tugboat, a toy tugboat who gets the man at the toy store takes it home to his son, who then plays with it in the bathtub, and the tugboat's like, this is the best kind of life a tugboat could have. And then he dreams bigger and ends up getting, the boy puts him in the stream, and then he gets washed out to stream, and then he keeps saying this is, and everything along the river keeps getting bigger and bigger and more industrialized, and he's sailing along and doing his little toot toot, but then there's big ones. Eventually he ends up back at the water, and he's about to go out to sea, and then there's the man and the little boy right at the end of the dock, like there to like get him right at the end. It's like a very, I don't know, there's so many children's books that I like read, and I'm like, whoa, it's actually very, very profound.
Yeah, it does sound like a dissolution and reintegration of consciousness.
Yeah, it really is, because he's all of a sudden like, oh, it's kind of scary out here, like, but I'm just gonna toot my tugboat horn and keep going.
Wow, yeah. I think that'd be a fun episode. Maybe we have to wait till James has kids. I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah.
Maybe. I don't know. I love kids' books. I worked in preschool often. It was a long time.
I swear there's like a whole subplot that's implied in Curious George Goes to the Hospital, where like I think the man in the yellow hat maybe has like a child on the side, or like an unknown. Like there's too many coincidences in Curious George Goes to the Hospital, so we don't have time to go through that one. Yeah, Betsy, the girl at the hospital, she's the only one in the whole series that has the same color tie as the man in the yellow hat. Her dress is the same as his tie with the dots.
Wow. Yeah. Gosh, you are going really down the conspiracy theory rabbit hole there.
Yeah, there's some great posters, like, because they're very, like, I guess they're written in the 50s or 60s, but like there's like so much there's like these posters on the outside of the hospital that say, come get your leg x-rayed right now in this hospital. Like it's just an advertisement for people on the street.
Let's go get our leg
Maybe they did that. I don't know. Maybe they threw x-rays around. Like my godmother could remember when just to be like high tech, when you would go to the shoe store, they would x-ray your foot just to be like, oh, we have to get the fit right for your boot or whatever.
They used to x-ray your foot?
Yeah, completely. Yeah, there was no reason. It was live.
No idea.
It was like you put it into a box. It wasn't even a film x-ray, so just tons of gamma radiation for no reason. Children's feet. Yeah. just
nice.
to sell berries. Yeah.
When did you say that was?
She was old. I mean, she passed away, so I have to look it up. But I did Google it. Like there was a period where they just kind of, to upsell you, they would be like, oh yeah, this shoe, that's for you. No, for real. I mean, because the shoes are like, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You can't like you don't need to x-ray the bones to know like.
And then they came up with the like the metal thing that you just measure your feet on. There's like that was advanced. That was the advanced technology. Like
that's the big brain. Yeah. Yikes.
Well, it's been great connecting, and we'll look forward to getting into these. We'll kind of continue to do some of the interviews, and then hopefully once a month or every 2 weeks we can connect and do a roundtable, and sometimes bring a friend. We should do a D&D episode on like the collaborative storytelling, and then have Kearney back on, because that Halloween episode with the psychology of death, that was one of the more popular ones, and Kearney's a huge D&D expert and Warhammer, all kind of role playing.
Yeah, I think that podcast made me so jealous. That was a good one.
The psychology of death one.
And all of the October ones.
We could do another version.
The artwork in my office that's like a formaldehyde bottle came from a listener who drew it like from that episode. There's like something on the side of it that but that's what it is. They sent it. And
that's awesome.
What were the other ones? I don't remember. I guess I don't ever see the release schedule. You were saying there are other October episodes. You mean the scary stories ones?
Yeah, I think some ghost ones.
Oh yeah, we could go there.
Yeah, we definitely. I'm glad we've got multiple contributors now. We need to do this October. We'll do like a cool like ghosts and hauntings episode.
Anything paranormal, I'm there.
Yeah. Sounds good.
Yeah.
Well, thank you guys so much. Check out the website at www.gettherapybirmingham.com. And if you want to support the podcast, we sell the t-shirts and the bumper stickers and stuff, but those are mostly at cost. But what would be really helpful, and it might help you out too, is I recently found out that I'm the heir to a kingdom in Africa, but I can't afford the taxes on the inheritance. So I think that if you guys want to go to our Patreon for just $1,000, you know, I can give you $1 million if you'll just go ahead. Parody, please don't do that. We don't have a Patreon, so it doesn't matter. Yeah, anyway, like I'm a Shaw.
Yeah, people are gonna like
something.
set up a Patreon now.
Yeah.
Oh no.
Yeah, I think they have to have my banking information, but yeah. So anyway, thank you guys so much, and we will see you next week.
All right. Bye,
Thank
guys.
you. Bye.
Stop dreaming. What's your weakness? I'm not